probably I want to use.
We had got it on the screen. Thanks.
There we go. We still good online? Okay, so I forgot where I was at, but essentially there's a very slim moment of risk that we take in. The mortgage company takes all the risk. If the buyer defaults over the next 30 years, the seller doesn't have anything to do with that. They've already conveyed title and the mortgage company is dealing with that. And so seller finance is a little bit of the wild west. They haven't had these big institutions that have kind of like formalized everything. And so you get a lot of good and a lot of bad. And it really kind of comes down to the agent that's writing up the deal and what they know about these different types of methods. And so over the coming months, I'm going to put out a lot more material and explain this all in depth for everybody. And then if anyone has any transactions, I'm always available. But so this is kind of a hierarchy, in my opinion. We're going to talk most of today on sellers and listings and how to go about that. And then I'll kind of touch on buyers at the end. But for me, in my opinion, this is the hierarchy of conveying title with seller financing. So note deed of trust that's kind of like a first position. And so we really can only use that when we are when there's no debt on the property. And then next is, sorry, these should be flipped. Sorry, there's typos already. So the next in the hierarchy is the all-inclusive trust deed. That's kind of like your wrap mortgage. And so we're taking more of a second position to the underlying mortgage in that situation. A contract for deed is similar to an all-inclusive, other than there is no conveyance of deed up front. And I'll get into some of the specifics of these in a second. Then a lease option is also, so a contract for deed you're going to get on title, and then a lease option generally you don't. And so that's kind of in a nutshell the hierarchy of it. As sellers, we're going to actually prefer to go from lease option and work our way up through contract for deed, all-inclusive trust deed, and note, because we want to stay on title for as long as possible. We don't want to give away anything that we don't have to. And most of the time when we're negotiating against other agents, they don't know what they're doing, and so we can generally structure things for our clients. And then if in fact, when I have a seller finance listing, I get people calling me up, I would generally tell them that if they don't have an agent, they're going to be better off, because then I have to be fair with both parties. And so it is a nice way to get yourself into a limited agency, and then we can rep both sides and give both parties a pretty fair deal. But most agents don't know what they're doing out there, and most buyers or sellers are probably better off unprotected than they are with another agent. Having said that, do you guys have any specific questions on what these are? These different types of methods of conveying deed? Okay, perfect. So I would like a little bit of feedback on this. So for the last, I don't know, handful of years, it's been pretty either a neutral or a seller's market, right? And so we're only starting to see this just barely. And so the seller finance strategy that I'm going to be talking about today, the market is just shifting into this. And so there are several other strategies that we can go into in the future. But are you guys seeing some of these things where if you're a listing agent, you're going to have to pay the buyer's closing costs again? Not to mention your own seller costs. There's rate buy downs, having to repair houses again. We're not selling $50,000 over with holes in walls and roofs anymore. But and then the seller commission. You guys seeing stuff like this out there? So on a, where's my phone? I was gonna pull up a calculator here and just kind of calculate that. I didn't do that in the slide, but I mean, 6% of 400,000 is 24,000. You know, and so just doing quick math on a $400,000 house, a seller can lose $50,000-$60,000 to sell their house, and that's not including price drops. And so it kind of sucks, especially when I don't know about you guys, but most of my listings are still thinking that it's springtime and they're getting 50,000 over. I know, I think Jen just said that earlier today. But yeah, so it's a little bit of a hard ask right now for the market to adjust when, or our clients to adjust when they're not in it every day like we are. But so yeah, that's kind of stuff we're seeing. So some of the advantages that we can do with seller financing. And these are not in order. Apologize for that, but we can generally get a higher sell price, and I probably should have put that at the end because I'm going to run some math for you here in a second. But with seller financing in last year's market, I was able to get $50,000 to $75,000 over market value. This time of the year, we're generally just not having to do as many price reductions on seller financing. And I'll get into the reasons why here in a second, but we generally ask for at least a 10 to 15% non-refundable deposit. And I've seen them up as high as 20, 30, 40%. And so we actually, again, deposit's one of those interchangeable terms. I use that because a lot of times these feel a lot like a landlord type situation. Let me actually explain like kind of the basics of a deal. What we do is we'll get a deposit up front, and then we're going to essentially be the bank for the buyer. And so our job is to structure a deal that's one, advantageous for our seller, but two, what I'm most concerned about is protecting against risk. Because like I said at the beginning, the risk is not just a moment in time where we shake hands and exchange property, where we're now acting like the bank. We have exposed risk to not only the buyer, but also the market conditions. And so there's a lot of things that we have to factor in. And sometimes these notes go all 30 years. It's pretty rare that they do, but I've seen them go the distance. And so we have a lot of exposure that we have to kind of protect against. And that's my first concern. And so the 10 to 15%, one, that covers two things. That covers hopefully all the transaction fees. Sometimes it doesn't cover transaction fees. We can do it for less than 10 to 15%, but I generally don't like to, because again, what it does is it gives the buyer more control than I feel like they're vested. And so the bigger as a seller, obviously the bigger the down payment, the better. We want to take all the equity out of the property and turn it into cash for our client. But it's actually not called a deposit in the paperwork. It is either a down payment or an option, depending on if we go with a contract for deed or if we go with something like a lease option. But the buyer will the closing costs and the seller closing costs are usually less than $1,000. There really isn't a whole lot of closing costs because as a seller, what we're looking to do is sell it on lease option primarily. That's ideal for us. One, a lease option helps our seller then qualify for financing in the future. Contract for deeds and all-inclusive trust deeds are harder to qualify for financing. Some institutions won't allow it at all, and some do. And so we prefer lease options if we can for several reasons. The nice thing about lease options is it's almost like a two-part closing. So once money's all exchanged and we're ready to close, as we're accustomed to as realtors, that is just more of a finalizing of the option, and the actual closing isn't for years down the road, and then the buyer can handle that in the future. And so there really is only a document transaction fee at this point of a lease option, and so the costs are very minimal. There's no title insurance or anything at this point. And then generally speaking, the positive monthly cash flow for your client is $500 to $1,000 a month for 2 to 10 years. Is kind of what we see depending on the type of buyer. There's right now anyone is a good candidate as a buyer for seller financing. Generally in a hot seller's market, you only see a few segments of people that really love seller financing. Generally speaking, the people that love seller financing are investors. Probably 60% of my transactions go to investors as buyers, and they're willing to take a negative cash flow because they can come in with far less capital than they're used to with an investor loan. But we see immigrants recently, divorcees, credit issues. We see a lot of people that they just, for whatever reason, can't qualify at a bank, but they have good money to afford it. And we can structure that so that our sellers are safe. But right now in this market, everyone wants seller financing. It's becoming very hot. And the reason is because 6 months ago, a year ago, we could get rates at 3%. Now rates are close to 7%. And so there's a big arbitrage. And so paying off that underlying debt is kind of doing a disservice to yourself and your buyer, where we can meet in the middle. Traditionally in a seller's market, we would be selling seller finance at a higher than market rate. But there's such a large gap right now that we can actually make our clients a good amount of money, and also give the buyer a pretty sweet deal, even if they can qualify at a bank. And so those are the ones that you see lasting for quite some time, 10 years, 15 years. I've got a couple people that want a full 30 years, because they're wanting to lock in a 5% interest rate. And we can go into that at another time. I'm going to probably do a quick calculation here in a second, but for the most part, we're just talking high level today. Normally speaking, because we are offering seller finance, whatever there's a need for it. Whether it's in last year's market, the need is people can't qualify at the bank, or whether it's this year's market where people just want a better rate. People are generally willing to look past pristineness of a home. That's not a hard fast rule, but for the most part, people understand the benefit that seller finance is offering them, and so it does allow your client to spend a little bit less on repairs. Having said that, obviously you want to get your house ready when you're listing it. You want it to look good up front, and so there's a little bit of wiggle room on that one. But obviously with seller financing, you are the bank, and there is no qualifying at an institution. There's no checking with an institution. It really comes down to whatever the seller's needs are and whatever the buyer's needs are. You guys come together, and I mean, you could offer a 2% rate. I've personally bought real estate on a 2% note before, and so you really can structure whatever interest rate you want without asking. I mean, for your client doesn't have to ask anyone's permission. And so rather than paying the $10,000-$20,000 for these crazy buy downs to get into a rate that just is unreasonable right now, you can offer it without any cost to your client at all, which saves you a lot on buy downs. And I mentioned already fewer price reductions, but we can structure it. And so a lot of these I'm going to talk about as a buyer, and you're going to hear me in a few minutes talk about pretty much opposite terms of these. And the reason why is because, like I was saying, like, we can structure deals that are really beneficial for our clients, whether we're buyers or sellers. But in this instance where we're sellers, we can definitely structure. And I can't think of the last one I've structured that wasn't like this, but the buyer is taking on all the real estate, the taxes, the insurance, the maintenance. And so even though this feels like a landlord situation, and we're getting large deposits up front, $50,000 to $100,000 deposits up front, and we're cash flowing each month, it really isn't like a landlording situation, because these people have a lot to lose if they screw up. Their payments are generally $500 to $1,000 higher than what a rental would look like, and they're taking on all the escrows, they're taking on the property maintenance. And so we can just actually, what we'll do is we run the payments through a third-party escrow company, and they manage everything, and there's no property management. There's none of that. There's no worries about vacancy for the most part. Because if these buyers walk away or they get behind on their payments and they breach the contract, they're walking away from all their equity. They're walking away from their 10-15% deposit, and they're walking away from all their monthly payments. And so generally speaking, they are substantially more reliable in making their payments and very consistent in that. And so for your sellers that are a little bit concerned about having, you know, 2 payments, what if they back out? That is a possibility. Like, we can't control what people do, but we do our best to mitigate it. I generally explain it as being double collateralized, because we're the ones that stay on title through this process until they've paid every last dollar. We're the ones on title, and then we have a promissory note essentially signed by the buyer with such large deposits. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not willing to walk away from $75,000. So they're generally very, very committed to making the payments. And yeah, so you also generally, depending on how we structure it, you can also receive the tax benefits. So I'll just do like a real quick. Absolutely.
So in this scenario, if I was the buyer, how am I protected? Like, is there something recorded, like a notice of interest? Like, how can I avoid the seller like selling it out from under me?
Yeah, so
Many walking away.
yeah, so I, even when I'm the seller, I still insist on doing a notice of interest. Because I do want to do fair deals for everyone, and I would never underhand anyone, but I can't speak for all my sellers, right? And so I don't want my sellers to be able to underhand people, and so I don't even tell them that it's an option. I tell them it's just part of the deal. And so kind of how we structure that is we will sign a notice of interest, and we will give a notice of interest is essentially a cloud on title, and you're the title girl, right?
Yeah, it's just a flag to say, hey, somebody has interest in this property.
Yeah, so, and you
Get a hold of them.
you could probably explain it better than me, but it is essentially like a cloud saying, hey, you can't let go of this property without first checking with this person, right? Yeah, so we will do a notice of interest. We'll pre-sign it and we'll give it to them. If they file it or not, that's their choice, but we sign the document and give it to them. And then to protect our seller, we also will, well, there's 2 things. One, an additional thing that we do to protect the buyer is we will pre-sign the deed, and then it will stay with the escrow company. And so whatever warranty deed or quit claim deed that we're signing at the time, that's being held in escrow. And so if our seller dies, that is one of the risks we have to protect against. Our seller dies or becomes indisposed, out of the country, whatever. We have escrow instructions pre-signed with escrow, and they're holding the warranty deed already. And so seller dies and buyer fulfills the contract, they go to the bank or whatever, they get a loan, they bring the money. We don't actually have to have the seller participate 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road to convey title. We prefer it, and we still try to play nice with everyone, but we do hold the title or the deed up pre-signed up front for emergency purposes, and likewise we have a pre-signed release of notice of interest that's also held by escrow. And so if the buyer dies and defaults or whatever, the seller has recourse without there are steps that have to be taken, and I'm not going to go super into the weeds on that right now, but both parties have some protection that's pre-signed and that's held at escrow, and as long as they follow the steps in the contract, they can go forward without needing the other party. But does that answer your question? Perfect. Any other questions?
Mine's more of like a comment rather than a question, but just based off of what you've been saying so far, it kind of sounds like it's very similar to like a hard money lender, but rather than it going towards like a financial institute, it's like going through your seller. Am I correct in thinking that way, or am I misinterpreting what you've been saying?
Well, That's not my experience with hard money. Generally, hard money is a third party, more like a lender, but they're higher interest rates. We aren't going to get additional money. We are using the house as the money or as the leverage. So the fact that we are already on title and own title, I guess I should be looking this way instead of, but since we're on title and we own the house and we'll say we've got a mortgage of 300 and the house is worth 500. That $200,000 of equity, that's ours. Well, our clients, I speak for my client a lot, but that's ours. And so rather than going to a bank and getting money to then lend to them, we're just saying we already own the house. And so we're essentially creating the money in the paperwork. Does that make sense? That might have just made it more confusing. There's no money changing hands from the seller to the buyer. Because when a lender, a hard money lender, or a mortgage company comes in, they're acting in the buyer's behalf to give money to the seller to give the house up, but we're already giving the house up without the money exchange. Make it
Yeah,
worse?
that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. I felt like that was a horrible answer. So what was your question?
Yeah, how do you know if you have a, if you have a seller and the house coming to the market, how do you know if it's a good candidate to do seller financing? Is it basically they don't need that cash to go buy a new house?
Yes, we're gonna get into that on the next slide.
Okay.
But great question. So I just want to kind of, online people, do you care which board I'm on? Or can I?
Probably this one.
This one?
I don't know.
Okay, so I'm gonna throw out some quick numbers and I have like chicken scratch handwriting. But actually, does someone want to give me a scenario of like one of their last transactions? If they know what the underlying debt was, what they sold it for, and the interest rate? We can use a real life scenario.
Ooh, and I got one for you, but
Okay.
the lack of numbers. So.
Okay. Oh.
It was 95,000.
Okay. Is that sell price or the debt? Okay,
We own zero. The seller owns zero.
okay, we can do this one.
Um,
So there's no interest rate either then. Okay,
they, the buyers put down 3,500.
that's on.
Huh?
Okay,
Yep. Wow. I was just telling you, it's gonna be fun. And the seller gave the buyer $5,000 for a new roof. Yeah.
what did you do with closing costs and commissions and all that?
Seller paid. On both sides.
Some deals, this one not overall, I was trying to explain. And then you just structured at the end or monthly? Oh,
Seller did.
so he came out of pocket like 20-30 grand? Wow.
It was a 5 years, and then she had a balloon payment at the end, the buyer did, and then, she paid all the taxes and insurance on the property, the buyer. And, actually, she just closed on it a week ago and like sold it again, so,
Oh, awesome.
yeah, but anyway, specialties, that's how we,
Yeah,
that's sending it off to them.
awesome.
And the seller paid for all those fees too.
Yeah, good. And so with me coming here, I bring an escrow. We've got one in-house now, but escrow specialists, they've been around for a while. There's one other one. There's really only 3 in the state that I know about. But what I was wanting to explain, I apologize I wasn't clear, is a traditional listing that wasn't seller financing. And then I was gonna run the numbers on what it would look like on seller financing. So that was my fault. So who had a listing recently that was a traditional transaction?
I can give you a scenario, but
Okay.
we won't say who it is, because that would be horrible. So, purchase price, 771.3.
Okay.
And then somebody with a calculator, closing costs, commissions, all that stuff, taxes, HOA. The final debt came to 787, 466.30, so it's about what?
787.
G7, 466.30.
So this guy's upside down.
No. This is the buyer fee. This is the buyer has to pay sales price.
Gotcha.
And with all his closing costs, it's 787.
What came out of the seller's pocket? What was the seller's cost with his commissions and whatnot?
Oh, the sellers?
Yeah, all of his concessions and commissions and everything.
That I just have the buyer.
Oh, you're fine. Do you remember off top of your head, what was his, did he have any concessions, do you know?
30 actually.
30K? Okay. 30K plus the commissions or minus commissions?
Plus the commission.
Okay. And then, what was his underlying mortgage, or did he have a HELOC or a second? What was his total debt on it?
That I don't know.
Okay, how long had he owned it? All right, we're gonna say that he owed 650 on it, all right? Okay, so he owns 650 in debt. We'll say he bought it. I don't know, 2 years ago, a year ago, and his interest rate is 4%. Okay. Just so we can have a scenario here. I've got a fancy calculator. If you guys get into these, you'll want to probably download it. It's called Carl with the K, Carl's mortgage calculator. But I love it. We'll say that.
Here's the razor if you need it.
Thank you, Jen.
Sure.
Okay, so not including escrows, because obviously this guy still has escrows, but we're gonna pass escrows on, and so it's neutral essentially. This guy is paying on his debt 3103.20 a month plus escrows. Okay, and then we'll say that we sold it at the same sales price. Like I said, depending on how you market it, you can get a higher price for this because we're offering additional value. But if we sell this at 771, we'll say we got a 50,000 over here. So we got a $50,000 down payment. So we're going to be providing them a note of 720K. What are rates right now? Who's the lender that was here?
Like 7%.
7%, right? So what's the best rate you've seen in the last 30 days, 20 days?
5.6.
5.6?
I closed the.
Did you really?
Yeah, I was very proud of it.
Okay, so let's say we gave them a 5.5. No, would the buyer be thrilled at a 5.5 right now? Okay, so if we're at a 5.5%. So they are receiving in this scenario 4,088.08 plus escrows. So you see the advantage to go into seller finance, because a lot of this is interest. And so at the end of a 5-year note, you guys know how amortizations work. If this goes for 5 years, they're mostly paying interest. And so at the end of this, depending on how old this note is, right now you can see the offset. We're just gonna run. Okay, so quick math, 720 minus 650 is we've got a $70,000 in equity that's working for us. And I can run, let me run. There's several different ways I can attack this, so I'm going to bounce around for a second. I apologize. We are making almost $1,000 a month, right? So if we got $1,000 a month times 12, we're making close to $12,000 a month divided by $70,000. And your ROC, return on your cash, in this scenario is 17.14%. And this is double collateralized. And this is also very consistent. Don't use the word safe. It is the safest that I found, but when you use the word safe, people think that there's zero risk. There's always risk. But so this is very consistent and predictable, reliable. And so this is one reason why you would want to do this, is if you're tired of the market posing you in down years, this is a pretty guaranteed way to make yourself some really good returns consistently. Most of my background in this is for investors, and that's what got me into this is I wasn't satisfied with a variable 6% return in the indexes and whatnot. So anyways, there's that, which is one advantage up front, but and we're assuming that we're selling it at the exact same price. Generally, this would be a higher price, which obviously would increase this. But then, sorry,
do you normally lend the sales price, or do you lend the sales price minus the down?
yeah. So if I've got debt, I'll wrap it and I'll make a markup or an arbitrage on the debt, which that's where the real advantage is. And I can run a scenario where there's zero debt, but essentially a zero debt will look like whatever the interest rate is. So if there was no debt, we're just this number right here would be 5.5% because there's no debt to make a markup on. The reason why this is so much higher is because we essentially have $650,000 of the bank's money at 4%, and we're selling it at 5.5%. So we're allowing our client to make 1.5% on $650,000 that's not theirs, which is how this gets so high. And that usually spurs the question, like, what about like due on sale clauses and stuff like that? We can get into that on the next slide, probably. The other thing I wanted to point out here that we're not even factoring is $771 times by 0.06.
So people online can't see it. They can only see the slides on the TV.
Oh.
So the camera is not.
You told them to go to that.
Hey, I'm still looking. No, it's not working.
So in this scenario, 6% of 771 is 46,000.
I think I have to stop sharing. Yeah.
Huh?
On the screen.
For anymore.
It may cover it, but you have to. All they see is the slide. They don't see the camera.
Oh. They wouldn't see that screen anyway.
Nope, it was the other one.
Huh?
You're right. It would have been the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah, 50-50.
We good?
Yeah.
No,
They just can't see this?
yeah.
Well, we can take a picture of it and post it if we want. But so in this scenario, this seller is selling at 771. 6% commissions is 46,000 plus the 30,000 in buy downs and concessions that she had mentioned. Theoretically, fairly accurately, this seller is paying $76,000, and so their equity. Sorry about my handwriting. That comes to 695 minus 650. So they have about $45,000 in equity is all. Versus here you can see they've got closer to 70,000. And so there's several reasons why, fiscally speaking, you would want to do this. Even though we're giving a below market interest rate, we're keeping more equity for our client. And this also is not including the $50,000 down. And depending on what commissions are, commissions are really like 90% of the cost of a seller finance transaction. So depending on what commissions are, we'll just use the same 6% in this scenario. They're getting $4,000. All the costs are paid up front, and then they're getting $4K in their pocket in this scenario. And they also get 70K. So they are essentially $30,000 richer going this way. And the reason why is because we're not having to pay most of that.
So the commissions are paid at the front.
That's how I prefer to structure it. There are ways to structure it other ways if we have to. But I prepare my sellers to plan on paying all closing costs up front.
The down payment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
down payment / option, depending on,
Yeah, whatever.
yeah. Okay. Any questions on this? Sorry, online people. So, you raise your hand or John? Oh.
I'm sorry.
We do.
Perfect. Thanks. So even with giving a blow, this is kind of the strategy that we're gonna want to run with right now, because most of our listings have these really fantastic low interest rate loans. We don't want to give those away. So I generally try to talk my clients into doing it right now, because it's significantly more advantageous for them, whether they're investor minded or they just want more money because they're greedy. And I say that as a compliment. Seller finance usually works out better for them.
There's a comment online, if you'll click the chat
I don't know.
up at the top. The number 2 over the red one, right there, click that.
We have Heather. She actually has some numbers she wants you to run for.
Oh, is this the Heather I was talking to yesterday?
I don't know.
Hi, yes, it is.
Hi.
Stuart, run them on that board so they can see
Can
them.
you guys see this board?
We can't see anything. All we can see is your
All the-
slides.
Is the camera not on at all?
Oh, because we have to stop sharing. Okay. we're
It's
gonna
on,
get
it's just really blurry.
Stop sharing. Okay, can you see that board over there? Kind of almost. Here, let me zoom into it. Okay, stand over there, Stuart. We're gonna get this figured out. Then zoom in. Okay, there you go.
Wow.
Oops, will do, right? Okay.
What?
Better?
Is it backwards?
Is it backwards?
It could be backwards. No, it won't be backwards.
It could get really bad.
What's your question, Heather? And with this helpful,
right.
so much, we glad we waited?
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you.
Good.
Okay, so we have a listing for 449. They owe 190 and they have a 3.5% interest rate.
So 449 is what they owe?
No, that's what it's listed at.
Okay.
Here, this.
And then
With those buttons.
what are the other numbers?
They owe, their mortgage is 190.
Okay, all right, I'll write bigger so that you guys can see it easier online.
Empty more.
More right here.
What interest rate?
3.5.
Okay. And do you know their monthly payments or how much their escrows are?
Monthly payments about 1,100.
Okay. The thing I forgot to mention over here, there's a third advantage. Sorry, you online people, but there's a third advantage, and that is because the amortization schedules, how they work, they're mostly interest heavy. If your buyer or if your seller is 3, 4, 5 years into their payments, every payment that the buyer makes, generally speaking, more principal is going to their debt than is to the new note. And so even if you start off with $70,000 in equity, it's entirely possible that when you get paid off, it's $80,000 or $85,000. So there's a lot of cool advantages on that, but All right. Let me run some math for you, Heather. So, what my calculator is telling me is $853 and some change is P and I. And then, so your escrows are 250, is that right? Roughly? Okay,
Most likely, I don't know those details.
yeah, probably pretty close. Okay, sorry, I'm so used to writing small, is that legible? Let me make- So, in this scenario. Let's say, so a lot of times, like I'll list on my listings, hey, my seller prefers seller financing or they don't, depending on where their head's at. But a lot of times, even if I'm listed at like a market price, I can tell agents on the phone, like, hey, if we are gonna go the seller financing route, we're gonna need an extra 20,000 or 30,000, because what we're essentially doing is we're selling the house at a future price. We're taking the risk, even though we're passing the risk on, we are taking the risk. And so a lot of times I could tell someone in this scenario, like, if we're gonna go the seller finance route, we're gonna carry the risk for 5 years or whatnot. I want to sell it at 475. My client needs a little bit of consideration, and that usually will go over fine, but we'll just run the numbers on this. So let's say we get a $50,000 down payment. And if I run some quick math, we're gonna be, actually, I'll do it with my calculator.
You got about 5 minutes, Stuart, to wrap it all up.
Oh, I thought I had an
You're
hour.
at 11.
Oh, okay.
And then just let's announce your future teaching of the class more in depth for a couple hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your next class.
Right. So. Heather, they're telling me I got 5 minutes. Do you mind if we run these numbers later on today?
Not at all.
All right, perfect. All right, how do I get back to my slide then?
His share screen down the bottom screen something. Yeah, and then find your slide. There you go. And then go over to the right and hit share. There you go.
Okay. How do we go to the next slide now?
So there you go.
There we go.
Good.
Okay, so here's generally the problems. Do this together real quick last minute, so they're probably not all clear or detailed, but so when you guys identify a client that you feel like this strategy would work for, you reach out to me and we'll do like an initial consultation and we'll strategize. There are so many options. That's why people love and hate these, is because there's a million ways to write these, and I can pretty much find a way to bring a buyer and seller together if they're open to it. And so we'll want to strategize up front on what your client's needs are before we go to market. And then once you start getting offers, we'll deal with negotiating then. But these are kind of what you're looking for as a seller. VA loans are like a hard no, and the seller needs less than $50,000 cash out. Now, both of those have an asterisk because they aren't firm. I have seen these done on VA loans, and I have seen these done with needing $100 and something thousand out. They are possible, but there are additional risks for doing that, and so we would have to explain that. And I probably need to talk to Steve and Jen if this is a hard no or not.
Generally VA loans, yes.
Yeah. So VA says that it's not allowed, and VA does kind of check on that. And so your client is taking a lot of risk. Now we pass that on to the buyers if it's allowed, but that's a Presidio decision. We can pass that on, but and then we can get more cash out, but once closing costs, agent agent fees and different settlement costs are all factored out. We're generally not giving more than $50,000 to the client, but it is possible to get more cash out. We can structure our commission on the monthly, we can structure our commission on the back end, but then it feels like you're working for free. So that's not ever fun. We don't really want to do that. Anyways, yeah, so you do, if this kind of works for your client, then you're gonna list it on the MLS under the term section, you list seller finance and lease option as options for terms. And then once you start getting offers, then we'll talk about that. And then we've got the MLS, their seller financing docs are very substandard. So we have our own custom ones. I originally had like a 20-page addendum, and then I ended up just paying an attorney to turn it into its own contract. But there's just a lot of risk to market exposure that we want to mitigate as best as possible. And so we have our own custom contracts that we use here. And then also with that, like these are some of the, supposed to say et cetera in there, but these are some of the documents that, oh, there's the et cetera. Some of the documents that will do the lease option or a promissory note, deed trust. So that's kind of in a nutshell what the initial stages are. Once you have clients that are wanting to do this, then we'll talk a lot more. Let's see, I've got 2 more slides. I'll power through them real fast. On the buyer side, there are advantages, and we might have to just kind of circle back to this in another meeting. There are several advantages for a buyer, including no qualification process for conventional financing, no loan origination fees. The buyer can lock in a purchase price right now, even though they're not prepared to qualify for a home. They get all the emotional benefits of home ownership. In this market, they can negotiate better terms than what you can get at a bank. And then that allows us to then build our credit well, getting the benefits of being a homeowner, lock in the appreciation for ourselves. We can get the tax benefits, lower APR. So we've touched on a lot of these. I can make this another presentation another day. And the advantages to you as the agent, one, obviously, the more understanding and knowledge you have, the more you can service your clients, and the better agent you are. Allows you to close deals that otherwise wouldn't be closable. So that puts more money in your pocket. By us doing this, you can see we're adding an extra $75,000, not 75, we're adding an extra $35,000 in value. I normally charge a higher commission to my clients when I do seller financing. On the selling side, I generally will ask for somewhere between an 8 and a 10% to do these, because they are more expensive and they do cost you guys more money, and they cost us more money because we're getting attorneys involved and everything. And so they are more expensive. And so the client, when you show them the numbers and they're going to benefit an extra $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, they're happy to give us an extra 10 to make it happen. And so that's kind of a cool thing. So you can make more money. And then, yeah, I touched that one. So, yeah. Anyways, I'm available for you guys if you guys have any questions, one-off questions. I anticipate this time of the year it's going to start getting busy, and so I prefer to have the conversations when you have the clients, but I also want to get you guys the knowledge that you need so that you can get out there and get in front of clients before you have the information before you're with them, so you can close the deal. So feel free to reach out. I don't know if my information's on the website, but 385-326-5250 is my phone number. And I should put it on the handout. Oh, there it is right there. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so let me know if you have questions. You can text that number too if you'd like.
Okay, thanks, Stuart.
Absolutely.
So Stuart just came on. And Stuart is our resident expert now with Presidio for seller financing. So we're working with Stuart to direct all inquiries to him. And he'll discuss any costs and fees and stuff like that to work with him and that kind of stuff. He does have his own escrow company as well as his own attorney and contracts and everything. So we've looked at his program and that's why we brought him on. So we're excited to have him. So any questions that end up coming our way, know that I'll probably be directing you to Stuart. Okay, so thank you for attending our sales meeting this week, and that's it. Have a good day.
Yeah.